In this lesson, we are going to learn how to shape tween. Sometimes shape tweening might be called morphing, and that is because one object literally changes into another object. If you'd like to follow along, you can find the Pet Love Shape Tween Flash file in your Chapter 5 files. When you open this file, let's take a look down here at the timeline. You're going to notice this time we see green. That's because we actually have shape tweening instead of motion tweening. Let's take a quick second and drag our playhead over to the right and let's see what happens. As we drag along, we are going to see that we start off with one shape and end on another. Okay, so let's do that again. I'm going to take my playhead and drag it back. On this keyframe right here, this very beginning keyframe, there's an object that's a heart. Okay, let me grab the selection tool here. Now, one thing that I want to point out that's different about shape tweening than motion tweening requires you to have a symbol. Shape tweening is the opposite. It actually requires that you worked with vector art. Vector art can be created right inside of Flash with any of these tools over here in the Tools panel. This heart is actually just a vector object that hasn't been converted to a symbol. If you look right here on the timeline, that's this first black dot, which is a keyframe. It's that heart. Now, as we move along, not only is the heart morphing into a dog, but it's also moving down the timeline because it was set up that way, and this is where it ends. Now, these guys here in the middle, these gray frames, those are just blank frames, so let's move on down a little bit. And now when we get to our next keyframe, now we have another shape tween. This time our dog is going to morph into a heart. Now, if you're wondering what this little A is, that's a little piece of action script that actually stops the animation when it's rendered. Let's just see what it looks like rendered. Now, I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to do Command Return. That's Control Enter on a PC. And you're going to notice that the first animation played and then the second animation played. Let's try that again. Command Return or Control Enter, the first animation and the second animation. Okay, let's try that on our own. What we are going to do is now we're going to create a new layer. So let's go down to the new layer icon right here and let's make sure that our playhead is all the way back to the beginning of this new layer. You can do that by clicking this little Go to First Frame button right here, and that's going to take us back. Now, by default, every new layer has a blank keyframe because it's expecting something to go there, and that's perfect. Just going to make sure my cursor is there. We're going to go over to the library, and we're going to see that we have a dog, a cat, and a heart. Well, this time, why don't we morph a cat into a dog? All right? So just to be sure that we get the actual vector art that we need, what we'll do is double click right here on this little icon in the library, and Flash is going to allow us to click all the way down until we grab the vector art that we need. So this opened our cat shape, and if we double click here in the workspace again, when you see these little dots become active, you know you have your cat. Well, we can right click and choose copy, and now we can take this vector art and put it back on our original timeline. To do that, we'll click right here on Scene 1. So now that we're back on Scene 1, we can actually just paste our cat on our stage. So we'll right click and do a paste. You may notice that your hollow blank keyframe is now filled in because there's an object there. In the example that we looked at before, we had some animation going on and not only morphed from one object to another, but it kind of moved as well. Well, this time, let's just turn the cat into a dog and leave it where it is. We are going to need to start by creating another keyframe somewhere in this new layer. Why don't we go all the way down here to the end and let's put a blank keyframe. Now, if you're wondering why that heart appeared, well, what Flash is doing is it's showing whatever's underneath this red line. If that's distracting, which it probably is, let's go here and just turn the visibility off next to the bottom layer for just a quick second. Okay, so we'll just turn that off and we'll get back to that in a minute. All right, so back here, we need to insert a blank keyframe. I'm a big right clicker, but if you're not, you can always go to the Insert menu. You can go down to Timeline, and here you will find Blank Keyframe. Now, Flash is expecting us to put something in this keyframe. What we need to do is go find the dog. All right, let's go get the dog. Well, let's double click right here to get into the vector art again. And on the stage, double click one, double click again. Sometimes you have to double click more than once. But what you want is actually these little dots because that lets you know that you have the vector you need. Right click and copy. And now let's go back to scene 1 and we are ready to paste. Now what we want to do is paste this dog in about the same place as the cat was in, but we really can't see that because it's back in frame 1, right? Well, let's turn on onion skinning. Let's look at the bottom of the timeline and there's a little icon right here that says onion skin. All right, this is kind of cool because what it does is it allows us to see a shadow of where the cat is supposed to be. Now, when we paste our dog, we'll get an idea of where we need to paste it, okay? So let's go up here and paste, and we'll position our dog about the same place as the cat, all right? Very good. So onion skinning just allowed us to see where the cat is without duplicating the cat. We can turn onion skinning back off, and now we have our dog in the same position. All right, well, now we need to do one other thing, and that is to create our shape tween. Right here in this little gray area, you can right click, and the second option down is to create a shape tween. When you do that, you are going to see a green background with an arrow, okay? Well, let's test it out. We need to go to the beginning of the timeline, so I'll go down to this little button and click go to first frame. And now if we click the play button, we can actually see our cat morph into our dog, okay? So in our first example, it morphed and moved, and in our second example that we just created, it morphed and it stayed in the same place. Let's try that again. We'll go back to the beginning, click play, and watch our cat become a dog.